It's said that billionaires use astrology in order to manifest, but many view billionaires as the corporations that are keeping our environments and experiences under so much stress. So, if billionaires can use the tools in order to access source consciousness, then what does it really mean to be spiritually connected? Welcome to Sundays with Saaja, where we talk all things metaphysics as it relates to the narcissistic spell on your nervous system. And if you're new to this channel or have yet to do so, go ahead and like and subscribe, because Reverend Dr. Saaja is about to help you turn your thoughts into a gold mine.
You are now tuned in, exploring the poetic depths of ancient metaphysics with Rev Saaja, the poetic metaphysician. Spell-breaking, mind-shaking, soul reclamation. Saaja the doctor, the healing one. Saaja says.
Now, in order to understand the concept of being spiritually connected, you have to tap into what I call the observer effect. Because it is through being the observer that you materialize your experiences. So what does this mean? Of course, if you are one who views billionaires as evil or perceive things in general as good and evil, then you are creating interference with your connection to the source, not the other person. Because when you think of billionaires as being evil, you are essentially, how can I say this? You are taking your idea of money and you're making it undesirable. So billionaires, we are identifying them by way of their frequency, their ability to magnetize their frequency. And we'll talk about how that corresponds to spiritual connection in a minute. However, you viewing billionaires as evil collapses you into that narrative. So therefore, anytime that you think of money in that regard, there is something undesirable about it. There's something undesirable about money because your thoughts are a frequency and they emit into the energetic field. They're electromagnetic, your thoughts are. So based on the frequency, it tells the universe how to register it, which is how you manifest based on your frequency. You manifest based on your energy. So if something about money is undesirable in any way, shape, or form to you, associating billionaires with evil, it attracts that narrative to you. Because that is how the signal, the code that is embedded in that synapse that you send off to the universe, that you eject into the universe, that's how it comes back to you in separation. So now guess what? You have created distance between you and your own wealth. And that is how it embeds in your subconscious. Now that is the trickery of the narcissistic spell. And if you're new here, we've reframed narcissism as a program because we understand that we are quantum supercomputers. Narcissism incites a severe state of lack or scarcity on the inside. So now you can't properly receive your downloads and connections or remember what you're even here for. So therefore, your money through your energy is alchemized and transferred to someone else. That's why I said billionaires we think of as corporations. So guess how those corporations make their money? Through your energetic density, because you've collapsed yourself with the narrative, or you've separated yourself from your timeline of wealth. And so now you've created distance between you and the richer version of yourself. That is how you are walking as the narcissistic spell, because you are not sure of yourself. You don't understand your true value. You don't understand that you are the source, and billionaires exist to show you how to alchemize your magic. That's how you reframe it. That is how you reframe it in order to cast that money spell on your vibration, so you can return when that signal emits to the universe, it returns to you in the form of compensation. Whether that is better health, better interactions in your relationships, or actual money in your bank account. Whatever your end goal is, you have to reframe the weight of that thought, the weight of how you view money in any sense, in order to raise your vibration, in order to lessen the density on your nervous system. So, with that being said, it's not always about what's evil, because some people, if you don't practice the observer effect and you collapse yourself into whatever narrative or an unaligned narrative that doesn't align with your higher self or what your higher self wants to experience, but you can't connect to that because you're so attached to the density of the third dimension. But this, what we just explained, introduces us to neutrality. The more nothing exists. There is no good and evil until you apply meaning to it. What does that mean? Okay, you see a billionaire and you automatically thinking they had to sacrifice, they had to unalive in order to get to that point of frequency, in order to make that grand of a quantum leap. So there's an aspect of you that demonizes it. There's an aspect of you who is not in neutrality. So you're collapsing yourself to that, and that's what causes the patterns of toxicity. So neutrality isn't just about evil, right? It's also about good. Some people think all love and light is good. Some people think you are only supposed to be walking in love and light. The shadow is something that you run from. The ego is something that you kill. That is an illusion. Those are your archetypes. You have to integrate all the aspects of yourself, especially the shadow, in order for you to reclaim your power and walk into your new purpose. You have to step into your new life with the good, bad, and the ugly, and not care what other people think it looks like. But because of how you perceive it, you are now able to alchemize. And then that is how you turn your trauma into richer experiences. So through this observer effect, nothing exists until you apply meaning to it. Billionaires do what they do because they perceive that action as the alignment that connects them to the source or to them or whatever power they serve. The universe speaks in code. It speaks in quality of the connection. It doesn't speak in terms of polarity or duality. It doesn't speak in terms of good and evil. So when it comes to love and light, a lot of people perceive that as being inherently good. But guess what? When you express self-love, when you start to practice self-love, you become someone else's narcissist. When you create those boundaries, when you stand in business on yourself, you become someone else's narcissist. And then they feel like you put them under a spell. They feel like you snatched away all their resources, all of their wealth. So what's good for you can be evil or negative or heavy for someone else. Okay? Now, the reason why that is important, even if you think of, because some people are going to say, well, billionaires, they attack children. They They are targeting the kids. They are energy harvesting even. Okay. Say that is. How are you going to raise your vibrations in order to provide those children an outlet? Think about it. Energy transcends. It changes. So what they perceive as being in alignment, you can counter that and give the people in the middle. Say this is the Vesica Pisces of good and evil. But in here, you have the egg of life, which is the children. In order to create an outlet for the children, they need a way out of here. You have to be able to provide that as a resource. And guess what? That looks like a womb, doesn't it? Because the womb is the matrix. That's the etymology of the word. Everything is about rebirth, birth and rebirth, birth, death, and rebirth. But if you observe death as being evil or negative, then you are resisting the urge to transform. Because you being triggered by billionaires isn't about what they do with their money or what they do to gain that status and frequency. It's about what you don't have that you feel like you can pour into other people to raise the vibrations of this reality, which then redeems other people from that survival mode that they are experiencing, from what you remember experiencing. Because a lot of the things that we're triggered by is because that was a point in time where we didn't have resources, the resources that these people have. But because they're not using their resource in the way that we would use our resource, we're demonizing them. Because they're acting in alignment in a way that we don't view as alignment to us, then we're disconnecting ourselves from that version of our timeline, which is just wealth, infinite wealth. If energy is infinite and we are extensions of the source, then the resource is us. But we can't pour into others if we keep thinking that it's good to pour into an empty cup. So we are rejecting the idea of money, which is keeping our communities in density, which is keeping the corporations in power in our communities. We have to be able to tap into who we are. We have to be able to tap into what is in an alignment, with our own energy. That's what it means to be connected to the source. Now, before I forget, I took a few notes. Your connection being about signal strength, right? Signal strength. These are 3 different types of signal strengths. You've got a intermittent signal. You've got a okay, but maybe a slow signal because there's not enough room for all the energy to move freely. There's too much density. It's too contracted, too compressed, too constricted. But you're still connected. But you have to work to expand that. How do you work to expand that and truly be connected? Well, you have to, 1, believe in yourself. You have to take yourself more seriously than anybody else. Because part of the narcissistic spell, the program that it is, if the mind is a computer, then the narcissist is the malware. So if we have malware in our computer, then we can't be spiritually connected. What does that mean? When we go to try something, we are met with resistance. When we make a resolution for ourselves or determine what we're going to do better or the boundaries we're going to set every so often, every year, then there is resistance. There is something that happens. We lack the motivation or we go through these struggles. There could be a storm or something that impacts us, something that we couldn't predict before that takes place, and it creates that resistance. Well, the resistance is also this lower quality connection, because your internal narcissistic thoughts will surface. The narcissistic thoughts that tell you that you need more, that you're not good enough, that you're not ready, there's something is wrong. All of these voices that you've picked up like dust on a fan, but the fan keeps spinning. But the dust, it comes off of the fan, and as it comes off of the fan, it is breathed in by the family or whoever is breathing in that energy, and then they become sick. Then their immune system starts running. Because you've picked up, that is you. That is your thoughts when you are on your healing journey or your manifestation journey. The dust that you're breathing in are all of those narcissistic thoughts, all of those projections from people who didn't know who they were, for people who were too afraid to step into their power because their spiritual connection looked like this. You couldn't even halfway see it, and neither could they. So it empowers them. It makes them feel safe because some of them are trying to make you feel safe from the rejection or from the failure. Whatever is your internal, your mental resistance. That's what your nervous system is trying to prepare you for when your spiritual connection is not dense, when it's not of quality, when it's not solid. Because you're letting all these voices in your head, you're letting all these voices surface through your nervous system without allowing them to express themselves. Why do I feel like I'm not motivated? Why do I feel like I have writer's block? Why? That moment is telling you to get online, pour into you, so that you can pour into others. But you have to remain neutral while you're on that course. So remaining neutral means when those voices in your head starts rising, because you're nervous, what we're doing is we're flushing the nervous system. When you start to break down reality using quantum physics, using metaphysics, quantum mechanics, science, whatever you want to call it, when you start to understand reality, you start to unlock shit. And when you start to unlock shit, then these emotions and this stagnancy rises in your nervous system. And it sounds like those voices in your head, those voices that create the distance between you and your wealthy timeline, those voices that subconsciously anchor you to the story of poverty, to the story of slavery, to the story of unhappiness or trauma, or whatever generational curse, whatever generational curse you feel like you need to be breaking. Okay? Now, consider this for a moment. The connection. You may be familiar with a quote that really inspired me. It really fuels me in these moments. And the quote is, believe what you believe in, believe what you be living, even though you be lying. The belief in yourself is your silver cord. That is your connection to the spiritual realm. The belief in yourself integrates your mind, body, soul connection. It integrates all the different archetypes and expressions of you, the inner child, the future self. It integrates, you believe, you connect, you interconnect those beings and you lift them up. That is what religious people, particularly Christians, think of as the rapture. But you're not being raptured by Jesus, you're being raptured by your higher consciousness. Because now you know how to receive, how to get resources or find your answers by the neutrality that is the observer effect. Not applying meaning to it, staying focused. You know the destiny that you set, you know your expectations for yourself. Everything else is noise and interference. Because you want that silver cord, you want that divine connection to your spiritual self to be quality, to be solid. Okay? Now, while we're believing what we be living, even though we be lying, what does that mean? Because here's what a lot of Bible thumpers will tell you. The word believe has lie in it. It's a lie. It's a lie. So if it's a lie, why is it considered manifestation for somebody? Why is the belief that this is what I have to do in order to be, which is what we think of these corporations and these big public entities. They believed because the belief is what strengthens that frequency, that connection with yourself, because you are the source, no one else. That's why when you tap into the belief in yourself, you become magic. But it's about, there are different types of magic. But just because one magic creates heaviness, darkness, or stress in the nervous system doesn't mean it ain't magic. Doesn't mean it's not sourced from the one consciousness. It just falls on the side of the narcissist. Speaking of narcissists, okay, let's slow this down for a minute, because this might be heavy for some people who've ever experienced narcissistic abuse. I want to have a disclaimer. I've had that experience too. I'm speaking from a standpoint of what I did to alchemize myself, alchemize my life, and renew my mind and step into my wealthy timeline. When you believe in yourself, none of your environment, none of the things that you think of yourself, none of all of those resistances that we talked about a couple minutes ago, they will surface. But you will reframe it as something else. That's how you break the spell. You have to lie to yourself in order to keep pushing yourself forward, in order for your manifestations to be propelled. If you want to become a magnet, you better learn how to lie to yourself in alignment. If you don't feel like it today, yes, you do. You taking action regardless, because you are aligning with who you believe or how you believe you deserve to live in this world, or you are acting in alignment to how you believe other people, the children, the babies should live in this world. You're acting in alignment with your purpose, whatever brings you passion, whatever triggers you, that you want to help other people from. You have to believe in yourself so that you can start to pour into your own cup, and then you pour into others from your overflow. One thing that the patriarchal way of teaching the Bible doesn't teach you is how to do that. They teach you that you separate your consciousness and you are an inferior being and you worship a superior force. Once you internalize that, even if you don't view yourself in that way, you act on the opposite. You act on the opposite. Those emotions aren't surfacing for nothing. They're surfacing so that you can flush your nervous system. That is why they're surfacing. So when you believe in yourself, think about it. Think about how these systems became so profitable. Think about how racism, think about how religion, think about how patriarchy became what it is. Because those people, before they became paid narcissists, were the narcissists to themselves. But they were narcissists in alignment. And let me explain what that means. Because those thoughts, even though you know what you're capable of producing, they still come in to gaslight you and tell you you're not doing something. You don't have something. You're not good enough. You don't deserve. Those thoughts come up. You have to act in opposition to that. You have to rewire that synapse so that it registers as a different frequency, as a different instruction to the universe. And that's what you call back to you. But you have to believe in your own words. Affirmations isn't the whole story, but the consistency is. Consistency is key. Because as much as you've been repeatedly, lifetimes over and over, carrying the same weight, fighting the same narcissistic beast, because you didn't understand the science of what was going on in your reality. So it lowered your frequency. And you thought that you were helpless or powerless because it had your consciousness in a false belief. In a false belief. You believe so hardly that your power existed outside of you, that God was somebody in the sky waiting lifetimes to come and save you, that you spent lifetimes being disconnected from the true you. You spent lifetimes not tapping into your own magic and making something happen for those that you feel like don't have it, or those who are living your past experiences. You want to give back to that version of yourself, you need resources. Because energy is money. Energy is money. Everything that you pour into is currency, either flowing to or from you. Okay? This belief, you have to become the narcissist to get rid of the narcissist. You have to devour yourself in self-love in those moments. You have to wrap yourself up in your own love in order to get through that storm. So when we think of these systems that are meant to oppress and suppress us, the systems like that fall under the umbrella of patriarchy, religion, and racism. Think about it. Racism. People profit off of racism because they exist in a reality, or they were born into the reality that they were without. They were inferior. So they acted in opposition with that. They acted in order to dominate. And then they created a story in the way that they teach religion in order to reinforce that narrative that they were the superior beings. They believe so deeply that they deserve to have the power that these particular people bring. They believe so deeply that it made them king in those people's reality. That's what made them the narcissistic beast. But we have that same beast mode energy. So despite what we know about our collective trauma in our history, we are acting in alignment, in opposition of that beast, which is us alchemizing it and creating our own resources, systems, communities, and money. Because we are the source. And believing in ourselves and creating that connection, it helps us create. If we are the source, then that which we pour into others is a replication of the source that we are. People who can't tap in, people who aren't empowered to make stuff happen. The work that we do to heal our nervous system and make that quantum shift, reclaim our power from our experienced narcissists, the micro narcissists, who was some of our ex-husbands, some of our mothers, some of our children's fathers even. To heal ourselves from that narcissist, we have to pour into ourselves first. We have to believe that we deserve better and act on that urge. So when we become the resource, because we understand that life is in the language, the power of life and death is in the language. We have to break it down in metaphysical linguistics. Because vowels technically don't exist, becomes ra. A Ra source, Ra is a sun god. So if we produce resources or we produce Ra sources, that means that we are giving people a life force. But we can't give a life force if we're sucking the life out of ourselves because we don't know how to snap ourselves out of our own narcissistic spell. The thoughts and the meaning that we apply to the perceived atrocities of life creates density in ourselves because we are collapsing ourselves to that timeline. If thinking about money and wealth is offensive to you, then that's your nervous system telling you where you have work to do. And this video is Rev Saaja's way of helping walk you through it. And if you need additional assistance, then I invite you to join us in the Matriarch Circle. We have a library of resources that are based on mastering the observer effect so that you can lessen the density on your nervous system and step into your soul's true purpose. And that is how you bring in and create generational wealth. Peace, love, wellness, and divine knowledge. And if this video resonates with you, be sure to share your thoughts or any questions you may have in the comments. See you on the next one.
Sundays with Saaja is brought to you by Rev Saaja. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like, share, and become a subscriber. For courses, books, community, private sessions, or to invite me to speak, visit RevSaaja.com and connect with me on my other platforms. And above all, live well and stay young.